Good evening and welcome. This is the meeting of the Special Education Advisory Committee of the Halton District School Board for Tuesday, March the 2nd, 2021. Given the need to practice social distancing due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we're holding this meeting remotely through a video conference. The meeting is being recorded. In accordance with Ontario Regulation 463-97 and the new guidelines effective February the 1st, 2021, any meeting of the Board of Trustees and or committee meetings which are open to the public must be live streamed and be able to take questions from the public. The purpose is to foster two-way participation during these meetings. To comply with this, SEAC will be using a Google form which is attached to each agenda, distributed in advance of the meetings and posted on the HGSB SEAC website page. Questions can also be emailed to goodrowl, GOODROWL @hgsb.ca. Questions posed during live stream meetings of SEAC may be answered during that meeting, particularly those that relate to agenda items, or at the following meeting at the discretion of the chair. For efficiency, multiple questions received that are similar in nature may be grouped together at the discretion of the chair and or the vice chair. Questions will not be attributed. Notation will be made that multiple people ask the same question. Any questions that contain language that is hateful or discriminatory will not be considered. So at this point, the Vice Chair, Lucille Morris, can start with roll call to record who is in attendance. Please, could you answer yes or present?
Hi, everyone. I'm here, Alison, Colette, Diane, I've seen Tracy, Joanna, Margot, Yalen, I see you there. Melissa, Sophia, who else? James.
Present.
Diane, Colette, Lorna, Sean, Scott, Robert. If I haven't mentioned your name, just tell me.
So did we have Jen Heidstra?
Jen.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. And Candice Keem?
Candice Keem is here. Hello.
Great. Hi. And Sarah Lansley?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi.
Hi. Did we mention Lisa Cameron? Lisa, are you here?
I am present.
Great, thank you. And we have two Dianes, so I'm just going to clarify. Diane van den Bosch. Diane, are you here? Not at this time. And Diane Miller.
Yes.
Yes, we've got Diane. And did we say Judy Shields? Is Judy here? No. Okay, so absent at this point in time, we have Diane van den Bosch and Judy Shields and Heather Gerrits. Okay, great. Thank you.
Over to you, Alison.
So we'll begin by honouring the land. And I'll take turn today. And as you mentioned before, if members of our community would like to take a turn, we would be very welcome to spread that honour around. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaran, the Haudenosaunee and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honour and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us. Now I'd like to move on to see if we can approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. It was sent out in advance. There was a slightly updated version sent out this afternoon. If there are any modifications or amendments that need to be made to the agenda, could you please indicate your wish to speak in the chat box?
Okay. James, would you like to move a motion to approve the agenda?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
And I'd need somebody to second that. Sophia, would you like to second that?
Sure. Yep, I second that.
So at this stage, are there anybody who would be in opposition of the acceptance of the agenda as it stands? If you just put your hand up, anybody who does not accept the agenda as it stands? None being seen, the agenda is approved unanimously. And next thing is the approval of our February the 2nd meeting minutes. Again, are there any errors or omissions? And if so, can you indicate in the chat box? None? Okay, Lucille.
Diane, would you like to move a motion to approve the minutes? Okay, thank you. And
I'll second that. James Baldwin.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, that's great. So with motioned and seconded, is there anybody who does not approve the passing of the minutes at this stage? Please raise your hand. None being seen, the minutes are passed as unanimously passed as they are. So at this stage, we're going to move into our action items. And the first item, 2.1 tonight, is a presentation by Superintendents Ito and Podrabarak on equity and safe schools in context. So welcome, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us here this evening. Can I get a bit of maybe a head nod if you can see the screen, the presentation? We're good to go? Excellent. Thanks so much. Yes, we're very pleased to speak to you tonight about the current context in the HGSB with respect to equity and safe, or really safe and inclusive schools. More specifically, we understand that SEAC was looking for some more information with respect to issues concerning safety within our schools and within our board, such as bullying, racism, and homophobia, just to name a few. We're here to share some information with you this evening, and we're also hoping to provide you with a better context of the current state, as well as ways that we're going to be going about informing our practices and supports moving forward with respect to safe and inclusive schools. So just wanted to start with this quote. This brings us back to 2009. So this is not new. The critical importance of safety and inclusion and its direct connection to student achievement and the overall well-being of our students is certainly not a new concept. It was certainly identified about 12 years ago with the Ministry of Education's release at that time of the Equity and Inclusive Education Strategy. And this is where this quote has been taken from. And as you can see, there's a central tenet of this document is related to the need to ensure safe, accepting, and respectful school environments. This document not only acknowledges the strength of diversity, but also the intersectionality of identities, race, religion, special education needs, sexual orientation, gender identity. We understand that we don't work in silos, and students themselves don't don't come to us as single entities. They are very complex human beings that are made up of a variety of identities that often interconnect and interrelate. So our brand new HGSB multi-year plan, newly minted by the Board of Trustees just back in January, and is now up on the board website. There's 5 key areas within the plan, 2 of which really connect deeply to the topic we're here to speak with you tonight about. And certainly one is equity and inclusion. And the broad goals within that particular area of commitment within the plan are, number 1, really to build upon the equity work that we've been doing over the years, such as the implementation of the inclusive design framework to inform school planning processes and ensure inclusion, full inclusion. To continue to implement culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy as a means of benefiting from the diversity that we know exists within our schools, within our classrooms, and finally to identify systems, identify and address systems of oppression that exists through specific commitment of actions as outlined within our new Way Forward plan, the Way Forward, which is the HGSB's Human Rights, Equity, Action, and Accountability Plan, which we've shared with SEAC just this year. The other area is mental health and well-being, obviously a really critical area within the plan. And in terms of the goals there, central to that is, number 1, creating expected practices for each and every one of our staff and of our schools for well-being in order to ensure common approaches, consistency in approach with respect to language, for bullying prevention and intervention, and ensure a renewed focus on creating and sustaining positive learning cultures across all of our classrooms. To also a key part of this area within the plan is to continue our efforts to have well-being teams in place in each and every one of our schools. And finally, ensure safe schools and equity IPLs are there to support intervention and restorative efforts when things go wrong, and in order to create an environment of high expectations for all of our students and our staff. So with that as kind of the broad overview of the high-level context of our commitments as a board, and I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Podger-Barrick, who's going to take us a little bit deeper into the area of safe schools.
Thank you, Superintendent Etoff. I appreciate you kicking things off here tonight. Just further to that slide on mental health and well-being and where that sits in our multi-year plan, I just want to highlight, a part of our commitment is to create a whole new portfolio around that. And some of you may know the superintendent leading that is Superintendent Mark Zonneveld. Will be heading up this new well-being portfolio, which really includes these practices. And then what we're trying to do is get a laser sharp approach right into the classroom. And really, and when Superintendent Etoff mentioned these practices, we're talking classroom practices that every teacher will use every day with our kids. And through that kind of coherence and steady application over time, we really think as a board, we're going to be able to move the mark on many of these important measures mapped out in the Way Forward, our new Equity and Accountability Action Plan, as well as around some of the safety measures that we deal with every day in our system. So in terms of the slide before you now, I've got the code of conduct there. That's the HGSB's code of conduct. And I think I was talking about that the last time I came to SEAC. And here I am again leading with that, because it does anchor a lot of our work in terms of upholding human rights for our kids and upholding high standards in our school. We try to hit a model of very high expectations for kids, along with high supports. And that's our job as staff, to offer that blended high support, high expectation model. If that gets out of whack, we don't like what we see in there. So we try to hold ourselves to that dual standard in delivering supports along with high expectations for kids. So I just took 2 examples here. And these are ones, these are codes I've taken from our suspension documents that we pass out to principals and their principals look at. And one is 30611, which means nothing to you, but it's in our legislation. It's called hate or bias motivated occurrences. This is something we're really focused on in our school, and it's about bringing forward a really consistent approach in calling things what they are. And Superintendent Etoff will later on mention our harmful language protocol in more detail. But you can see under hate and bias motivated occurrences, these are words or actions considered offensive in reference to a person's sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, race, color, ethnicity, culture, citizenship, ancestry, origin, religion, creed, family status, mental or physical disability, or socioeconomic status. The barometer between what is hate and bias motivated has to, the barometer there for hate is if it's affiliated with a formal or organization or not. Absent that, for example, if you're spraying a Nazi symbol or a white supremacy group logo or something of that nature, if you're really aligning it with a known hate-based organization, absent that, it's still treated as a bias. Both are regarded as really violent offenses, and principals look at this. The other section is this, a more serious in code around expulsion, and that could be even on a higher level. So the first one is suspension 306, and 310 is an expulsion, which would be something even more targeted with even greater intent to hurt another individual. And so principals look at these 2. And if we could go forward to the next slide. You'll see what a principal has to do. And through this, we look to get kind of that just right consequence. We certainly do not want to ignore these events when they happen in our schools. We do want to dig in and call them what they are, which is hate. I think in the past, about 80% of our suspension used one single code, and that was called moral tone, is generally what principals call it. It kind of became a collection. You've hurt the moral tone of the school. It was fine for principals to use, but part of our commitment in Safe Schools moving forward is to really put a name to the act. And if it's a racist or bias motivated event, let's call it that. And so we are working with our principals to do just that, and so we can actually better track these occurrences and know what they are. If we use generic terms for them, we're not going to know the frequency or if we're making progress on them. But I wanted to put up progressive discipline because when an event happens, this is what a principal looks at right away. They must take the mitigating factors. I'll speak more about that right away around the particular student who has done something wrong. They have to look at the nature, severity of the behavior, the impact on the school climate, the impact on the student harmed, and the relationships within the school community. So that is this concept of progressive discipline. And how do we look at that? Progressive discipline means a continuum. Suspension, expulsion is the most extreme end of that continuum. You could do lots of other things in between. Next slide, please. Then first up, a principal must look at mitigating factors. This comes certainly into play. Students with racialized backgrounds and certainly with students with individual education plans. There's a whole number of questions there the principal must ask themselves before making any sort of decision around how do I move forward here. And what are we going to do? And what's this just right consequence that I'm looking for when something of a serious nature has happened? So you can see the questions right on there. And for the purposes of SEAC, for a student with an individual education plan or disability-related needs, is the behavior characteristic of the developmental and physical disability? Have appropriate accommodations been put in place? And is the consequence likely to aggravate or worsen the behavior or conduct? So there's some of the questions that comes down to a principal's judgment that they must explore during their investigation of any event. Next slide, please. Just to give you a sense then, if you're looking at bullying and our data, it might not strike you as in a system, and I've put our enrollments on there over the years. You'll see 2017-18 through to 2021. And for example, with 45,000 elementary schools, elementary students in our system, we did 6 bullying suspensions, and that's this year, midstream. Our numbers are quite low, but even in other years, you can see 10, 12. And that may surprise people based on the definition of bullying. Similarly, in secondary, the numbers also, for example, this year we've had 0 just because of COVID and the social interactions are so limited around kids. But the other thing is, if you talk about the word intersection, is bullying intersects with so many things. It can be physical, it can be verbal, it can be used racialized language, it can be homophobic, it could be so many things. So principals really try to drill it down to what is the core of the action here. Bullying is generally something longitudinal, power imbalance. It's got a very specific ministry definition. Principals will use it, but they use it with a great deal of thought. And it can also, it doesn't mean bullying isn't happening. It could be coded as something different. For example, and I'll lead into the next slide. Thank you. Hate or bias motivated incidents. And this is where you've got the racialized, homophobic language that come out. Again, not a huge number of incidents here. But if you look at this year, which is in the top slide, and this is with kind of COVID restrictions in place, you can see that our elementary suspensions are up from 2 in 2019-2020 to 12. And this is for the first half of the year, up to about February 8th. So I wanted to capture same time frames. And that is because these incidents have been happening. They may have been characterized as, you've heard the moral tone of the school before, it could have been bullying. But when it comes down to it, it's a hate or bias motivated event. If you've used really charged racialized words, homophobic slurs directed at another student, we are getting better at calling it what it is and putting interventions in place around this. And this is part of our equity work moving forward. And it's not just about consequencing, it's also about offering 360 support for kids as well. So I just kind of wanted to take you through some of those elements and a few of the stats here. Again, they're smaller numbers. We're thankful for that. Do we think this covers every incident in the board? No, I don't think we're naive enough to think that. But you can already see that teachers' ears are better attuned, our administrator ears are better attuned. We have equity supports in place so schools can consult with the equity teams, putting plans of support in place for the one who perpetrated, used the names, and also for the victims, because we want to support. We are still a teaching learning environment. But through this, we also want to treat these very seriously because there's a strong, very strong values-based lens to this type of thing, and we simply won't tolerate the use of going unchecked. And that's a different than zero tolerance, you're gone kind of approach, but it will be met with support. We expect a lot from our kids, but we also will offer high supports for kids, as I said earlier. So if we could have the next slide.
And just before I move to the next slide, I think Trustee Shuttleworth just wanted to jump in with a question. I know we're going to do some questions at the end.
I do.
Scott?
it's really quick. Sorry, Scott, but I'm just wondering. So with if you can go back. So I'm just wondering, with those numbers, do we know the breakdown between in-person and online bullying? Is there?
Right now, we would not have that. Right now, we do have. We'd have to go through each incident by hand. We do have another code for online. Inappropriate use of technology, Trustee Shuttleworth. But right now, that would be more for Zoom bombing a class or something of that net effect. If it's a racialized, homophobic, that type of incident, we're very much saying to principals, call that what it is. If it's a bullying incident, whether online or not, we would say call it a bullying incident. So the online use, and everyone is a judgment where we call it, but to move these markers forward, I think we have to be very clear in terms of what we are calling incidents. And it's not always nice, and it can be hard for a parent to hear, but we have to dig into that type of work.
So these numbers then are specific to, so because we've had that quite a longer term of virtual learning, but these numbers are all for in-person learning incidents, or no?
They would be both. They would
Okay.
be both. So if you're bullying, whether online or in person, I have to tell you though, a lot of our bullying is virtual and done outside of instructional hours, to be blunt. But that doesn't mean that the schools don't dig in on it as well. So this would be a combination of both, to be clear. And I said one of our challenges in Safe Schools is to look at the data, and I've encouraged on the one slide I put up the number of students with IEPs. That's the single data point we have right now. We can't disaggregate that from that. IEPs are the students, that's the only current data point limitation. And when we talk about the student census, you'll see why that's so important for us to be able to better disaggregate the data. Currently, you'll see in the one slide we have 4 of 8. So it's about 40 to 50% of students currently getting suspended, whether it's the bullying code or the harmful language codes, are students with IEPs. And obviously, over the life cycle of this next multi-year plan, we really want to dig in there. And the data that we get from the census is going to help us better do that, because we have lots of consultation in place. But, and again, for this, it's, I pulled the data already on that, it's about 50%. So that's a constant challenge for us as well. And I wanted to share, we are aware about that. We don't like that the way it is, and we want to better take that on as well. So Rob, I'm going to turn it back over to you and to.
Sorry, can I just jump in with a quick question? It's Alison Brindle here from Learning Disabilities Association. In your new census, will you also be able to collect data on, obviously collecting data on bullying and whether students feel bullied, but will you be collecting that by type of disability? Will we know if students are on IEPs, or if they're, because obviously one of our concerns is that the rate of bullying the rate of being bullied is higher for students with disabilities than without. So I just wondered if there's any way that data will be collecting that.
I can jump in here, Allison, and just kind of swing right into our HGSB student census. So, the biggest challenge, as Scott mentioned, is like most boards, we just don't have that data in order to cross correlate. So we have individual student achievement data, we have suspension data, but we don't have a student identity based data. And so that's why all school boards by 2023 need to be reporting back on that particular type of collect it and report in on that specific type of information. So as you may well know, we're right in the middle of our HGSB student census. We just launched this past month, and we're rolling into our next grouping of schools, and within the next month, we'll have done a full census of our students K through 12. Obviously K-3, the parents are doing on behalf of the students, and 4 through 12, the students are engaging in the student census themselves. And so what this is going to provide to us is exactly that. In the census, there is a whole section and piece, and the census questions, by the way, are on the board website, so you can go through, you can see exactly what we're asking the kids, and the questions have been provided centrally from the Ministry of Education and the Anti-Racism Directorate, so they're consistent across school boards. So they ask those identity-based those identity-based questions. So student identity, around, how students see themselves in terms of race, in terms of religion, and so on and so forth, gender identity. And then there are a number of other questions which speak to some of their school experiences. So with that, we're going to get a very rich database. Obviously, the information is private and it's confidential. There's only one person, our senior research consultant at the board, who has access to this data. But what she'll be able to do is generate reports. So we'll be able to see, how many of our students who identify as LGBTQ within the board have also identified issues around bullying, for example. Obviously, apply that to students with special needs and their identities as well. So it's going to be a rich data source, and then we're going to be able to cross-correlate as well. So we're going to be able to take that information and take the information that Safe Schools collects and be able to generate reports out of that, and even layer over student achievement on top of that. So really the only board that's been able to do that in a rich way, in a real meaningful way over the last 10 years or so is the Toronto District School Board. And so as a result, they've been able to really highlight those areas of need and really target their strategies and target their protocols. And we're looking forward to the opportunity, as all boards are, in order to be able to have that same opportunity. And that's why it's so important that as many students as possible participate in this process. I hope that answers your question. I just saw a question pop up there.
So the question was, is there a similar way of tracking bullying against teachers or EAs as bullying against students?
So something, and we actually have Sari Taha on the line. I know he's up next with the next presentation, our Superintendent of Human Resources, and we are currently in the process, equity and HR and a number of different departments, working to create a staff census. And it will be hopefully, if everything works right, be launched later this spring, and it will be collecting. Offered, obviously it's voluntary, but we're going to afford the same opportunity to our staff as our students have had in terms of sharing more about their identity and about some of their experiences. So we're hoping the answer is yes to Diane's question.
Could I add just one notion to Diane's question at the bottom as well? The data I shared could be students couldn't be suspended, for example, for directing hateful language towards staff as well. So it isn't simply student to student or Safe Schools data. It certainly can be language directed at staff, being physical with staff, those types of things. But in terms of staff reporting, that's an HR function.
Yeah, so really the only other piece that we didn't touch upon, which but Scott did reference, is our discriminatory and harmful language protocol. Language matters. That was when we've gone out and we've spoken to students, in particular students, but to parents as well. The overwhelming harm and really the most significant issue of what's happening in schools to make them unsafe for students, and often directly relate to circumstances of bullying, is discriminatory and harmful language occurring? And to be quite honest, staff in some situations, particularly when those comments are racist, not really feeling like they have the full skill set in order to navigate that process. So, as Scott mentioned, our discriminatory and harmful language protocol, which is on our also on the board website, and we have a video posted as well that walks you through why the protocol is important and what it entails. But there is there's really two major pieces to it. One is to identify and stop the behavior, and to consequence the behavior and report the behavior, but also then support. There's a whole explanation piece of why that behavior has no place in our schools, the harm it creates, why it can't take place, and what will be expected going forward. So for more information, please check the equity webpage, and you can tune into the video there. So I'd be happy to take any other questions from the group or.
Yeah, sorry, Taha has a hand up.
Thanks, Alison. I just want to chime in quickly to Diane's question. I just want you to know that we do collect data, not unlike suspension and expulsion data for students. We do formally collect data from employees in terms of complaints of harassment, discrimination, incivility, any objectionable behavior in the workplace. So that data exists. The census data, not unlike the student data, will obviously allow us to collect identity-based data. But part of the census exercise is also a survey component that really, assesses, evaluates, measures what employees perceive or conceive of the workplace in terms of their working conditions. Have you experienced harassment, discrimination, those kinds of things? They're not necessarily, they may not have reported them, but again, it gives us another measure in terms of, what the workplace looks like. But in terms of collecting data that formally was submitted to human resources, we do that. I just wanted to share that with you.
And Alison, I see a final question up there, but maybe just a little bit more explanation, and then Scott and I can address that.
Hi there, it's Candace from Community Living Burlington that asked the question.
Hi, Candace. Would you mind just elaborating? Thank you.
Yeah, I think I love this, by the way. Thank you for doing all of this. I just want some insight as to when you guys are developing this, who are the key partners that have helped you to assess and to develop this?
To develop the discriminatory and harmful language protocol?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Yes. No, we've, it is one of many strategies and actions within the Human Rights and Equity Action Accountability Plan. It happens to be one that we have really highlighted and focused on for this year. And in generating that broader plan, as well as the actions therein, such as the discriminatory and harmful language protocol, we have gone out and consulted with a variety of different groups. Some are right within our board. Groups like our Indigenous and Racialized Educators Network. So that's a group of educators, employees within the board who identify as Indigenous or racialized. I will also look at our Equity and Inclusive Education Steering Advisory Committee, which is a multidisciplinary group which is made up of a variety of individuals, including trustees and principals and board staff. But the region of Halton is represented in there, public libraries, Halton Police, as well as a number of other groups. And then we have purposely reached out, particularly over the last 6 to 8 months, to specific community groups who we know who are sometimes their voices are underrepresented within the conversations that may happen at school councils or on PIC for the board, and we've directly reached out to them. So there are a variety of different groups. There's the Coalition for to Address Hate, the HALT Coalition to Address Hate. We have connected with various groups such as HALT and Black Voices, Black Mentorship Incorporated. So, as well as obviously through Student Senate and through a lot of those other internal structures that have allowed us to kind of reach out and run these initiatives and get their feedback on are we on target, and how can we make it better. So
wonderful. Thank you so much, Robert.
You're welcome.
Margot, question.
Right, thank you. Okay, I think my question is for you, Rob. I don't know, it might be for Scott as well. So with the student census, it was something that I was talking about with Tracy. I just have a question with, you say that from grades 4 to 12, the kids are doing it independently, and K to 3, they have parental support. What sort of measures or supports do you have in place for students who have difficulty accessing it that are still within that grade 4 to 12 range?
It's a great question. I might look to some help from a colleague on the line, Miss Mary Marshall. Yeah, actually, I'm just going to let you. I'm turning it over to you, Mary.
Thanks, Marco, for asking that question. A full range of supports. The goal of the working group that developed the census is really to ensure that as many students as possible can independently respond to the census so that their voice is heard. And so that looks like everything from students completing it completely on their own, and that is grade 4 to grade 12. In kindergarten to grade 3, it's the parents that actually complete it on behalf of their children. And then everything from complete independence to using any sort of assistive technology that they would readily use in the classroom as part of their instructional program. So the census is compliant with Google Read and Write that can read for them. The actual census form itself is a forced response. It's literally a click on the button using software called Qualtrics, which is highly secure and ensures the privacy of all the responses. And then we worked really closely with our colleagues in the Students Services Department to look at ensuring as many possible students in life skills classes and life skills community pathways programs could independently complete the census. And that might be an adult reading the census to them and they respond independently. There were a very small number of students for whom, based on the criteria in their diagnosis, it was identified by the IPLs and student services that the family would complete the service on census on behalf of the students. But ideally, the goal was for as many students as possible to complete the census with whatever supports they would use. And that could also include translation versions. We've got 10 different versions of the census available for families and students, as well as translation services through youth specialists. So we've tried to ensure as much as possible full involvement of the students.
That's excellent. I'm just thinking, so because I was asking that when we were looking at it, and like on the website, it talks about all the different languages it's been translated into. I just didn't know if it might be helpful for parents that are looking for that kind of information to know that their child, regardless of where they're coming into the survey, is still able to access it. I just didn't know. It's just not there. It wasn't easy to find, to look for. So just a quick comment.
No, thank you. That's great feedback. And I'll take that back to our group.
Great. So are there any more questions at this point? No. Well, I'd like to thank the superintendents very much for their presentation. It's great to see the steps that are being taken to move the board forward and make sure that our schools are as safe as possible for everybody in them, and that everybody is able to get equitable access to the education in the school system. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing what the census will bring. So good luck with that. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Okay, so for our next report, item 2.2, we're going to have a report on accessibility for the Ontarians with Disabilities Act by Mary Marshall and Mr. Tahini. Is it how do I say that? Let's just teach me. How do I say it?
It's Taha. I think it was
Taha. I think it was a typo in the thing. So it's
you got it. Sorry, Taha.
Sorry, Taha. Thank you very much for correcting my pronunciation. And look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you. I'll wait for Mary to project our slides. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us on the agenda. My name is Sari Taha. I'm the Superintendent of Human Resources, and I am the co-chair of the AODA Steering Committee. And with me is Mary Marshall. I'm sure you're all familiar with Mary. Mary is our Assistant Principal of Equity and Inclusion, Equitable and Inclusive Education. And I'm also joined by the new co-chair of the committee, Alison Vera-Ippolito, if you want to wave Alison. Alison is the General Manager of Human Resources and will be co-chairing the committee along with, I believe it's Ian Gaudette, who's taken over the co-chair duties. So Mary and I didn't realize that Mary is also leaving her position. So this will be our farewell, I suppose. Great, so I see the slides are on. Basically, in the next 10 minutes, we will give you an overview of the actions and steps that we have taken as an AODA committee and as an organization to be in compliance with the AODA Act and its standards and the framework that's set out in the Act. The framework revolves around 4 standards, and they are information and communication, transportation, employment, and the physical accessibility to our buildings. We'll walk you over the highlights of the report. The report was attached, I believe, with the agenda package. And we'll turn our attention to some of the key achievements that we've had in the 1920 school year. A bit of context before we dive into the specifics of the reports and the summary. The last time I was here, I believe it was September of, actually no, it was I think October of 2019. And I remember that night vividly. I came out of a bargaining session with our QP local, and to provide you with an overview or share with you the annual status report. And the reason I bring that up is at that time when we provided you with the status report, we entered into sanctions as a province, as an industry, as a sector. Labor sanctions that really began in October, November 2019, and they really didn't finish roughly around March of 2020. And in March of 2020, as we all know, the COVID storm arrived, and the world has changed since then. And here we are, March of 2021. The reason I say this is for two key points. One, the sanctions and the pandemic has, needless to say, pumped the brakes on a few actions, few plans that we had intended on undertaking in the 1920 school year and the 2021 school year. But more importantly, I will say that the pandemic really underscored, highlighted the importance of the work that we do. Equity at the essence of equity is fairness, it's accessibility, and the work that this committee does in terms of the various instruments, the various procedures, the various awareness campaigns and actions that we take is about granting everyone the opportunity to access the organization and then really achieve their potential. With COVID, and even though we've pumped the brakes on a few things that we were doing, equity and accessibility and accommodations were never more important for our students, for our staff, for our community. So really put all of the work that we do in perspective. We as a committee, our mandate is really compliance, reporting, and making sure that we survive and satisfy the legislative requirements. But really, the pandemic put a sense of realism to the work that we do and the importance of the work that we do. So I wanted to put that in context and bring that to your attention. In terms of the framework that we work within, obviously there are, I'm going to call it a general pillar of actions that we take, and it revolves around procedures and policies, training, raising awareness, education of students about our moral and professional and legal obligation to accommodate those with abilities and limitations and restrictions. We also work around the information and communication pillar and the physical building. And those are the highlights that Mary will share with you. I'll start by really touching base on some of the policies and administrative procedures that we in 1920 either continued to revise or develop from scratch. You see them listed before you. From the human resources perspective, the 3 bullets listed on the slide: attendance management, workplace accommodations, accommodating those who have limitations and restrictions, and also accommodating those who are about to enter the workplace, enter the labor market. Those are 3 of the most critical APs or instruments that we use to accommodate our citizens, our employees, or would-be employees. And again, during COVID, we've relied on them quite a bit for reasons that you can speculate and guess. The other 2 that are more student-focused APs or APs of interest are the prescribed use of assistive technology AP. It's an AP that outlines a transparent process by which students can order assistive technology, access assistive technology, and modernize these devices that allow them to achieve their potential. Those are 2 APs that were worked on in 1920. And also an AP, which is, again, listed before you on the slide, and that is the student use of guide and service dogs or animals. Down the road in this presentation, we'll talk about its staff equivalent, the service dogs, use of service dogs and animals for staff. But those 2 APs were key in terms of the policies and administrative procedures that we developed or refined in 1920.
Thanks, sorry. I'm going to take you through a few of the other highlights in the annual report. And this first one speaks to the education component and supporting students. So last time we were with you, we talked about some cyclical training that all employees are now part of on a 3-year annual renewal. And in addition, this additional AODA for educators piece was put in as an annual refresh for all school-based staff at the beginning of every year as a reminder of our professional obligations and responsibilities to really ensure that we're creating inclusive spaces so that all students can reach their full potential. So that was across the board for all school-based staff. That began in 2019 and continues on, and that's an annual component of staff training and learning. In addition, there were, as always, some specific training that was completed, and I've highlighted 3 areas particularly here around student services, where we know that the work of the instructional program leads under the principal and vice principal of student services really goes to ensuring the support of our students is being provided. So whether that's assistive technology training and learning that was done across the system for special education resource teachers at their networking sessions, ensuring that the skill level was there, the availability and the awareness of different types of technology was available and how to apply for that for students. More specifically, then, when we look at life skills classes, communication programs, and community pathway programs, some really more targeted learning for the staff in those program areas, ensuring that really meeting the individualized needs of students in those areas, in particular in those programs. And then finally, as always, very student-specific training. And we know that that is also plays out as students receive new assistive technology. And depending on what the technology is, staff are supported in order to ensure that the technology is really being maximized to its fullest potential to support students. Beyond those pieces that I've spoken to already, we also look at educational training that involves professional development to think about attitudinal barriers and really addressing issues such as ableism in our programs and thinking more broadly across our schools. So that's an ongoing part of the work that we do. And as Sari indicated earlier, that is work that continues regardless, but particularly was highlighted when we think about the impact of COVID on our schools and how we've really needed to think differently about how we ensure we're meeting the needs of all of our students. Within the area of information communication, this is really a lot of the nuts and bolts of the compliance pieces. But a couple of pieces I'm going to highlight for you. One, we finished the transition of all of our school-based websites over to the G Suite. So those are all now functioning on a common template. So there's ease of access. You know how to navigate them if you're a family member with children in multiple schools. We also are able to then run an AODA scanning mechanism to check for compliance for information that's included on school-based websites. What I'm highlighting here on this slide is a new function on our public website, hgsb.ca. And this logo that's on the left-hand side of the screen is found down on the bottom left of every page on our website. And if an individual clicks on that, that software that it takes you to is called HGSB, which is now embedded on our public website. When you click on it, it opens up menus similar to the two that you'll see on the screen there. There are multiple preset menus and settings that allow for an individual to quickly set an accessibility profile that fits for them. So you can see seizure profile there, visually impaired, cognitive disability profile, ADHD friendly profile, and there's more underneath that. Or an individual can also choose to personalize the settings. So magnifying text, rearranging text, decreasing the amount of text on a page, highlighting or contrasting colors and images. And the functionality is quite amazing if you ever want to take a look at it. Once you've set those settings, every time you log back into our website, those settings are available for the individual. Another area within information communication on the inside part is the library services work that they did supporting library staff, whether it's teacher librarians, librarian technicians, or administrators and teachers in the school. They've added a full suite of resources now to their website in their knowledge base to help support staff in ensuring that we have all the information we need at our fingertips to really be able to access accessible content across a whole host of platforms, whether that's text, whether it's visual, video, but the resources that they have prepared for us now provide schools with a one-stop shop, if you will, for how to reach out and find the resources that we need in order to ensure that all of our resources in the libraries can be accessible in a variety of different contexts. Of course, they add to that as the technology changes, but that's been a great improvement for our school staff. And the final piece I'm going to share with you is the built environment. And certainly with COVID closures last year, some of our installations were postponed or delayed, but those are back in full tilt construction now as they can with health and safety protocols in place. So there were ongoing installations of barrier-free elements, both inside schools, including barrier-free washrooms and elevator installations at a number of sites. We also had external work done. And so when any of the external work is being done, whether that's a creative playground, whether it's a learning space, the team in facility services, along with Suzanne Burwell, who is our environmental I've lost the term, anyway, our environmental consultant who works within the board, they work with a team of landscape as well as AODA specialists to ensure that any of the builds or retro builds or revisions or re-enhancements to our sites have all been looked at through the lens of accessibility. So that's another area that continues. And so last year in particular, when we think about some of the play areas that were created or the kindergarten play areas that were enhanced, accessibility lens was overlaid and centered in the planning of all of that. So I'm going to pass it over to Sari now to wrap up.
Thanks, Barry. I want to wrap up by giving you 3 key initiatives that we're working on or continue to work on in 2021 and for 21-22. The first one is, you might have heard that the Regulation 274, it's a regulation that governs how school boards fill their vacancies, their teaching vacancies in their districts has been revoked. And the government released a policy program memorandum that really outlines some of the expectations that school boards ought to follow in their hiring practices. Of relevance or of direct connection to the work of AODA is one of the requirements in this policy program memorandum is that school boards undertake a complete and comprehensive review of their employment and staffing systems to identify any barriers, explicit or implicit, and to eliminate them in an effort to ensure equitability, fairness, and integrity in their hiring practices. So that's one thing that's on number 1 in the queue in terms of the work that we're doing from an HR perspective and from an accessibility and fairness perspective and transparency perspective. The other element that we're working on is, we're making it as we go. The idea of conducting workplace interviews using technology and video streaming was a novelty before COVID, relatively speaking, is now a reality. And so how you conduct video interviews and how you facilitate them in a way that does not disadvantage anyone is work that we're doing, that we are hoping to develop a pristine, sophisticated guide that allows us to leverage technology without disadvantaging any of our employees or prospective employees. And finally, I pointed that out earlier, that we're also finalizing with administrative counsel and legal counsel an administrative procedure that will certainly go to the board trustees that really sets out a process with which staff who require, due to their limitations and restrictions or accommodations, the use of service animals in the workplace to allow that into the workplace while at the same time ensuring safety and the health and safety of others in the building. So those are the 3 key highlights that we're continuing to work on for the 2021, 21-22 school years. Mary, I don't know if I missed anything else you want to add. I'm happy to take questions.
Well, thank you very much. Very detailed and interesting presentation. Does anybody have any questions? Family Landsey.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was under my daughter's account. Or our families, I guess. I'm just wondering, in terms of the built environment, is there anyone involved or any way of testing that it truly is barrier-free? For example, someone on the committee or someone who sort of goes through the buildings or the designs who actually uses a mobility device. I only ask this having had experience with things like wood chips and playground with the city, wood chips and playgrounds where we're told they're accessible and yet power chairs don't work on them, things like that. So things like, buttons being in a place that doesn't make sense, that sort of thing. So I'm just wondering if anyone who's actually uses a device is involved in the process and if they've been through some of the designs. That's all. Thanks.
I can start with that if you want, sorry. I completely hear what you're saying there. Having been a principal in a school, it's always a bit of a bugaboo, right? When you see wood chips and they say it's an accessible site and you think, no, it's not. So I know that Suzanne Burwell and Facility Services are really working on this closely now. And so they've been, as I said, centering accessibility in any new builds and any retrofits. What we don't have, though, is somebody with mobility challenges who's part of the committee. In fact, when we met the other day, Alison, Ian, and myself, and Rob Etoff, who also works on this committee, we talked about how we need to expand this committee to ensure that, and talked about site visits out to schools, because I also, I think about things like curb cuts on sidewalks, right? Which is not even close to where the accessibly designated parking spot is, right? And you think, somewhere, somehow, we need to do a better job of this. And so I hear you loud and clear on those pieces, and that is a part of some of the next steps that we need to do in some of our walkthroughs, and a bit of an accessibility check, so to speak, or audit in our buildings. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Any other questions? I can't see any at this time, so I'd like to thank you all for coming and presenting to us. As I say, a great presentation, lots of wonderful work going on, and it'll be interesting to see what the next few months bring as you work on these new initiatives. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, take care then. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so now we're at item 2.3, and the final presentation for this evening is going to be by Sophia Siddiqui for the Halton Down Syndrome Association.
Okay, does everybody want to take a stretch? I've been sitting for a while. All right, I'm just going to share my screen with you guys. 1 second. Okay, so please excuse my formatting. It's not the greatest, but we'll make do. Okay, and everyone can see my screen okay? Yep. Alison, yeah? Perfect,
Yep,
thank you.
Can see it, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to share a little bit about the Halton Down Syndrome Association. My name is Sophia Siddiqui, and I am super excited to share all the great things that we do. So really quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit about the HGSA. What is Down syndrome? We're going to talk a little bit about World Down Syndrome Day, teaching students with Down syndrome, SEAC and what we advocate for, and then I'm going to highlight a few really cool resources that we have. And I think what I'll do later on is I will share this presentation with Lorna, because I think we're going to be adding, I know we've discussed the idea of putting our presentations, association presentations, in the actual, I think, SEAC website for parents to access. Okay, so the Halton Down Syndrome Association is a community not-for-profit charity which was formed in 1984. We have one full-time paid staff member and one part-time paid staff member, but largely we are run by volunteers, mainly parent volunteers, self-advocates, professionals. We have a pretty huge membership, 120 active members, and it's 120 families. And really our mission is to empower individuals with Down syndrome to reach their full potential through all stages of life. And the great thing is we actually have entire community as sort of the early years and the middle years, and then our high school and adult kids. So it's really a nice sense of community. The HGSA, what do? We advocate, we foster community, we raise awareness, and we provide support to our families. And really for myself and my family, it's been sort of really a sense of community. And just being able to talk to families and their experiences and, to help each other. A lot of times, many issues don't even really make it to SEAC because we have so many families that have been through the schooling system. And so we're able to help each other, which is really, really nice. HGSA in action. So the Walk for Down Syndrome is a very popular event that we run annually. And last year we ran it, we ran our first virtual walk and actually raised $90,000, which is very exciting. Every year we have a family barbecue and AGM, we have holiday parties, get-togethers, but one of the really impactful things that we do is the programming that we have for our kids and families. So we have music therapy, art therapy, sign language, gymnastics, sports ball, and all sorts of other fun things for the kids to keep busy, because one of the things that we really struggle with as families is getting our kids to join programming with the city or privately. Often the kids sort of don't entirely fit in, and this is really nice for them to be able to connect with their peers at their level, and so those programs are hugely popular with our members. We also run a lot of information sessions. So many of us are teachers, and so often we'll try to run workshops, we'll bring professionals in and run workshops for our families. So what is Down syndrome? And I think this is important to talk about because there is a lot of ambiguity, I think, in the community with their understanding about Down syndrome. And I do find that even within the education system and around with educators, a lot of our understanding about Down syndrome is quite outdated. So I thought we could kind of go over some of the basic facts. So Down syndrome is a naturally occurring chromosomal arrangement. And if you look at our chromosomes here, chromosome number 21, instead of 2 copies, there are 3. Okay, and really that is the biggest difference. It is universal across racial and gender lines and present in approximately 1 in 781 births in Canada. And contrary to popular belief, 80% of babies with Down syndrome are actually born to mothers under the age of 35. So many people think that, oh, if it's, a woman later in her years becomes pregnant and she's more likely, but statistics actually tell us otherwise. So Down syndrome is not a disease, disorder, defect, or medical condition, and it does not itself require treatment or prevention. An individual with Down syndrome has a higher chance of developing certain medical conditions. However, these can often be managed successfully with proper medical care. So we have a really exciting event coming up March 21st. So every year on March 21st, we celebrate World Down Syndrome Day. It's a United Nations sanctioned observance. And March 21st also became Ontario Down Syndrome Day in 2016 when Bill 182 received royal assent. And the cool thing with the 321 is it represents the tripling of the 21st chromosome. So this is our flyer for our event that we run annually. In Halton, a very popular event that we run is the HGSA's World Down Syndrome Day contest. We launched this, it's a 7th year this year, and it's open to all Halton schools. And actually the last number of years we've had, every year we have a greater number of schools participate. And really the idea is to spread awareness of Down syndrome. And this year our theme is Share the Joy of Down syndrome. And basically schools share their celebrations on social media to show how they celebrated the day. And the idea behind it is to create equity, empathy, respect, friendship, acceptance, responsibility. And I find, every year, a lot of the schools, they have assemblies and kids are able to, they get excited with the contest and are able to really, they learn a little bit about Down syndrome and then are able to share that in a fun way. So we've had schools win up to, $2,000, $3,000 for the school through the contest. So it's kind of fun. Teaching the student with Down syndrome. So another area that I think it's important to really dig into a little bit because there are so many misconceptions. So generally speaking, students with Down syndrome want to be included, they want to learn, they will learn to read, will rise or fall to expectations that are set for them, and they know when someone believes in them. Inclusion is extremely important for our kids. And we really believe, and the research tells us, that inclusion should be the first choice. It does take careful planning and best efforts from all staff, but really the benefits are for the entire school community. And so that, you will change the lives of many by including one really speaks volumes. I've seen this both as an educator in my classroom and also as a mom. Like the kids in that classroom learn so much: empathy, patience, care, just by having that child that maybe is not your typical learner in the classroom. So this quote actually is taken from the CDSS Educator Package, which honestly cannot speak enough about. That's a Canadian Down Syndrome Society. They have put together an excellent educator package, and we do try to send it out. They try to send it out to all schools. It is available digitally, but there's some excellent resources for teachers. And every time I've shared it with any educators, they always say, I wish I knew about this before. So we try to get it out there. So unfortunately, our kids do face a lot of barriers, especially when it comes to inclusion. One of the number one factors that causes the barriers is the outdated attitudes and beliefs. So Down syndrome has come a long way, and our kids have come a long way with respect to, how they're perceived and even their ability to learn, because what we do now is early intervention, research has told us, is key. And so kids now are starting speech therapy much earlier. There's occupational therapists coming to the home quite earlier. And so our kids are able to do more, right? So if somebody is sort of, that typical mindset is, well, these kids, maybe they can't learn how to read or they can't do as much. But a lot of that has to do with lack of knowledge, lack of resources and funding. Communication and speech issues, of course, are there, and physical characteristics. But one of the things that we really work towards is sort of the outdated attitudes and beliefs, and really kind of talking about that and addressing that in the community. So physical characteristics, every student, of course, is unique. However, a student with Down syndrome may have some of the following. So smaller limbs and a body frame, low muscle tone, atlantoaxial instability, which is a bone in the neck, which a lot of these kids have to have x-rays for because sometimes there's some instability there, hypo or hyperthyroidism, vision and hearing issues. Their learning profiles often are that they're contextual learners, so they need shorter lessons, frequently repeated, and they benefit from multisensory approaches, strong rote learners and good visual memory, difficulty with auditory memory and auditory processing, and can be affected by physical differences. So how much therapy do kids with Down syndrome need? Each student, of course, is unique. So their learning profiles are also like a typical child. Occupational therapy and speech therapy are very important. And again, best practice, as research tells us now, is early intervention with ongoing periodic evaluation. Most children with Down syndrome do require direct and ongoing intervention for speech and language due to low muscle tone, structural anomalies, and cognitive delays. So speech therapy is something that continues for quite some time. So this is really important too, and something that we advocate for, especially in the early years. Educational assistants are key. So their role is health and safety, we know that, but facilitating communication and participation for the child, facilitating peer relationships, support for learning, encouraging and reinforcing independence, providing assistance to the class so the teacher has time with each student. And of course, we know that they are not there to be the student's primary educator or translator. And so again, an effective educational assistant really can make a huge difference in the life and education of a child with Down syndrome. So of course, we do have some behaviors that come up with kids with Down syndrome. And often, we need to look at, what does that mean? Is a child trying to tell you something? And so we have some questions there to think about. And again, these slides are sort of a really good resource, I think, for educators and for parents as well. And we can avoid behaviors by using visual supports, allowing enough time, providing choice, things that a good educator would do in the first place. We do have representation in the Halton, the Catholic District School Board, as well as the Halton District School Board. And of course, we are here to advocate for parent involvement, meaningful inclusion, speech language therapy, etc. Okay, and a lot of what we do really is connecting with parents. I've gone into meetings when a parent is, new to the education system, and so sitting with them in the school, connecting them to resources in the community. We're really there to be a resource and advocate for our families. Protection of parent and student rights. We're here to advocate for our families. And the last, I did want to list some resources that are amazing. So as I mentioned, the CDSS Educator Package is really an excellent resource. And then the following are also some really great resources. So again, I was hoping to have this slideshow maybe linked to our SEAC page. So I think it'd be helpful for, both educators, but also for families. And I wanted to leave you guys with the following quote, which really summarizes my belief and our belief as an association. In a nutshell, if a student has no one to play with, don't be his friend, help him make friends. Teach others how to play with him. Help others understand him. If a student has trouble in groups, don't kick him out of the group. Teach him how to work in a group. Teach others how to work with him. He must be in the group to learn about the groups. If a student does not listen to others, don't be the only voice he hears. Teach him how to listen to others, reinforce him for listening to others, and teach others how to talk to him. If a student cannot do the work, don't take him away from the work. Accommodate his learning needs, reinforce him for what he does do, and do some of the work with him. And this was taken from the Teachers and Assistants Creating Success. So really, ultimately, our kids, they can learn. And I think that we really need to change the mainstream mindset of what Down syndrome is and what a child with Down syndrome can accomplish. Because, every day we see kids doing some really, really amazing things. And we need educators to really believe in them and set high standards. So yes, I spoke quickly. I know we sat for a long time, but I hope I was able to share that, an overview of what we do and what we're all about. I'm happy to take questions if anybody has.
So question there from Diane, let me just pull it up, was what issues do parents speak about that still exist in schools? Is it resource-based? Is it the shortage of EAs? Basically, what do you need? What will you be looking for to make things more successful in the school?
Excellent question, Dan. I think one of our biggest struggles is the EA situation, right? So we know that our kids do need that EA support, and the struggle is, and black and white is that there's just a shortage of EAs. We don't have enough EAs, and our kids, you imagine putting a child into a classroom without any support. We've seen kids, I've had parents call all the time, right, sharing their stories, and they say, I had a kid. I feel like the school was trying to weed him out. He's in grade 5. And they basically said to me, you need to move him into a contained program because we're not going to give any more EA support. So this child was walking out of the classroom, completely disengaged. And that's not what we want, So again, it's a balance of what can schools do to help with inclusion, and then working within the number of EAs that are available. So we do understand, of course, you one-on-one is not the perfect situation for families or for schools, but EA support is really, really important. I think we've been advocating for years that the teacher cannot, and as an educator and as a mom, I can speak to this, teachers cannot possibly fully, truly implement the IEP with our kids and manage, another 25 kids in the classroom. It's just not possible. So you do need EA support in the classroom. So that's one of the big, big issues. And for sure, the CDSS package is amazing. So I do wish, and it's available digitally. So I'd love for, maybe all contained program teachers to have access to that, or to become aware of that. So maybe we can look at how we can share this with all the programs, but it's a really, really great resource. And I think mainly it's changing attitudes, because kids with Down syndrome now can do so much more than they could do maybe 30 years ago. Just because now research tells us early intervention, contextual reading, we know what strategies work, and we need more educators to sort of stay on top of the research that's being done.
So question now, can you share it on the Community Living website?
Yes, please. That would be great. I can, maybe Lorna, I can send you a copy of the slideshow and then it can be shared out.
Margot.
Mine is just really quick. Sophia, that was such a fantastic presentation. Two of your spokespeople come and speak to my teacher candidates. So Alan comes every year down to Brock University to speak to my teacher candidates. And, I think you are so correct. It is that attitudinal basis. And I really appreciated, you said something a couple slides before, which I think is really important to remember, is that they will rise or lower themselves to the expectations set for them. So I just thought really well. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah.
Yes, Alan is our rock star.
Alan and Neil all come and
Neil
come down. So
we have a group of our adults with Down syndrome, and they're great. Like, they're running cooking classes right now, virtual cooking classes, and so they do a lot of fun things. And that's the thing, I just wish that more of our high school programs. That's one complaint that a lot of parents have, is that our high school programs, the community pathways, they're just not setting the bar high for our kids. Right? So if you're seeing, if a child with Down syndrome is told, your job is to, clean up all the garbage in the cafeteria, and that's their job all the time. What are their peers going to start to think of them? Is that how they're going to see them? Like, we know they're capable of more, but we need to break out of that mindset, right? So let's have them do other things, because they can do a lot more, but it's raising that bar.
Yeah, just awesome. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Margot.
This is great. It's Candace here, Sophia. Can I just say one funny thing? Is that okay? So one of the people that we support, she just had a birthday and she's 30 something. And we said, wow, Sarah, like, gosh, you look so good. And it's like, well, like, what's the secret? And her response is, it's the chromosomes, baby. It's the chromosomes.
I love that. I love that. And you know what? Self-advocacy too is huge, right?
Yeah.
Helping our kids understand, you know, what it is that makes them different. And she's owning it. That's awesome.
Yeah, she's owning it.
Thank you for sharing. It really is a shift in mindset, to be honest. Like, I think for myself too, as an educator, I taught middle school. By the time kids get to grade 8, those kids have already moved into contained programs. So we don't see a lot of kids with Down syndrome in our middle school. So if you don't see it, even as an educator, you don't really know how to program. But the schools where they are kids, you know, and the inclusion is happening, like I tell you, the other kids are learning so much more, you know, and gaining in the school community. I've seen some really amazing schools that believe in inclusion, and you see it, and everybody benefits from that. So, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for Sophia, for that. You've obviously given us a lot of information and really taught us a lot more about certainly I knew about Down syndrome and what you're here advocating for. So thank you for sharing that. And it will allow us to be more informed as we move forward as a group advocating for all students with special education needs. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so at this point in time, we are now at item 3.0, and it is the SEAC question and answer discussion and question period. So does anybody have any questions for Colette? Any questions at this time? Gosh, it's quiet. You haven't caused enough chaos yet, Colette. We need to.
They're lulling you into a false sense.
Yeah.
I'll take it for my first meeting.
So I can't see any questions at this time. So what I suggest we do then is move into the superintendent's report. We received a copy from Colette, and if you could provide us with a brief summary of that report, and we'll be able to take any questions in the chat.
I'd be happy to. Good evening, everyone. Before I jump into my report, I would like to echo the comments of the group and thank Sophia for her presentation. I found it very interesting and very informative. And if you wouldn't mind sharing the educator resource with me, I would like to find a place to put that on our intra site for staff. So
that would be wonderful. Yes, thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you. So I'd like to speak also, say a welcome to our newest SEAC members, the ABC representatives, Yalen Gorica and Jen Heidstra. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the former ABC representatives, Deirdre Wu and Hital Shah, for their contributions. We recognize that SEAC is a volunteer role and really in service to our students with special needs. And so I would like to express my gratitude as well as on behalf of the board. Thank you very much. I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome our new Vice Principal of Special Education Services. Her name is Stacey Farrell Bangirder, and she was just recently appointed at the beginning of this month. She started a day before me, in fact, and Stacey joins us from Acton District High School, and previously from Georgetown District High School, where she was really instrumental in supporting students in the community pathway program there. So Stacey brings us a great wealth of experience and advocacy for students with special needs. As you already know, I'm sure, we had a model change effective yesterday in our elementary schools. It was the first day for students choosing to switch from virtual to in-person or in-person to virtual. A little surprising to me that in this round we had more students return to in-person learning than transition to virtual. So the numbers are there for you: 853 to in-person and 569 to virtual. So the net transition really resulted in a minimal disruption to our existing organizations, which we're quite grateful for at this point in the school year for our students. The student census, I won't really speak to this. I think you heard a lot about the student census from Superintendent Etoff and Padre Barrick. And so you know that is exciting work that is underway, and will certainly give us some rich data that will be useful in many ways across the board. We also, Rob is spearheading the development of a Human Rights, Equity and Advisory Committee. Quite proudly, this committee is being fashioned after SEAC, and they are in the process of forming the membership of that committee, and it will reflect, much like SEAC, representatives of the community and staff and trustees. March break, of course, the timing has changed. We're no longer calling it March break this year. It's a spring break. It's been moved to the week of April for really infection prevention and control measures. And we know that our students, in fact, are very safe in our schools. And so the ministry thought it's best to keep kids in school than in the community at this point. So we're all looking forward to a break. We're going to hang on a little bit longer and go to the week of April 12th. Some good news on addressing our wait lists for psychoeducational assessments and speech and language assessments. The board is committing some additional funds in order for assessments to be completed over spring break and over summer break. We're currently working with the department to see how many of our staff are interested in doing this work over their vacation time, and to see how far we can reduce those wait lists. So I'll be happy to report back on that, perhaps in April, but certainly in May. I'll have a better idea of how many were done over spring break and how many we anticipate to get to over the summer. Linked into the report is a spreadsheet that really was at the request of LDAHH around the overview of the number of students who are identified through an IPRC process and those who have an IP that weren't identified through the IPRC process. I just want to highlight that we're having a little bit of an issue with the numbers. We pull our numbers from, I guess, two different data sources. We know that we should have 12,000, let me just get the right number, 12,240 IEPs in our system. And we're a little short on the spreadsheet. I think we're 441 IEPs short. We couldn't get that resolved today in terms of reconciling the data. So we are working on that, and we wonder whether there's a bit of an issue with the vendor of one of the data points. But it does give you a general idea, a pretty close idea around the identification in each of the numbers in the area, as well as the number of IEPs that weren't identified through the IPRC process. And the last thing is around summer learning. The ministry has confirmed that there will be funding for summer learning programs and as well as summer school. And the Special Education Services Department, as well as school programs, are currently developing plans for these summer learning programs, which may occur virtually or in person or a combination of both. So we're just working through those details at this point. We also have received permission to carry our funding for the after schools skills development program for students with autism. and we are able to transfer those funds into a summer program. So we will definitely be developing a program with those funds to support our students with autism. And again, more information will be coming out shortly. I'll bring that back hopefully to April, if not April, then May's SEAC meeting. And that's everything.
Great. So does anybody have any questions at this time? I have a couple of questions. So first of all, on your letter, it identified that for secondary students, the quadmester change date was adjusted by 1 week. So does that mean the quadmester will now finish basically, when will the quadmester finish? Is it because the break, it was meant to be that we would have the break and then there'd be like 1 more week before the quadmester finished?
Yeah, I don't have the exact.
Okay.
It's around mid-April. So the quadmesters were a little bit imbalanced, and the fourth quadmester had 1 additional week in it compared to the third quadmester. And we encountered some, I think it was really a technology issue around the staffing and sectioning of courses for Quad 3. And so pushing it out a week gave a little bit more time for this work to be done, and really it didn't impact the number of days in a quad, because that fourth quad already had a week extra. So, but I apologize, I don't have the exact transition date in front of me.
Okay. And then obviously, you know, we've been in contact with this already. As the Learning Disabilities Association, we are extremely concerned about the level of unidentified IEPs, which are now at over 2/3 of all IEPs in the elementary system, and are just about at 50% of IEPs in the secondary system, particularly as I can only anticipate that the majority of those children are actually students with LDs. The expected level of individuals with LDs in the general population is somewhere between 7 and 10%. If I look at these numbers, and granted there could be some changes to be made, we're at about 1% of the school population. So we're missing somewhere between 6 and 9% of students, so which works out to be over 3,000 students on unidentified IEPs that would probably be students with learning disabilities. And I just wonder how it is. I recognize that teachers do their best for the individual student at the time, but I wonder how, as a SEAC, we can really advocate for the supports that are required. And 80 to 90% of the students with learning disabilities do not have an identified IEP, and we have no way of tracking them. So that's my concern. And the other concern is that the number of unidentified IEPs is just continually going up. So I'm sure you're gonna obviously get some further data on that, but that is one of my concerns, and I don't know if other SEAC members also have an issue.
So I'm happy to touch on a few of those themes. You know, I think you know, the kind of the breakdown or the prediction of the number of LD students in that unidentified number is something, you know, we're certainly interested in. We do have a challenge with our current IEP engine that does not allow us to extract data based on the student's diagnosis. We are only able to extract data based on an IPRC identification. We are transitioning to a new IEP engine, and that IEP engine will allow us to extract data based on diagnosis and identification. So hopefully this is the last time that that this concern is here in terms of not knowing who those, where those LD learners are, because our IEP engine will be able to extract that data. But that said, we do have an emphasis on what we call Know Your Learner. And that really starts with the classroom teacher, the resource support staff in the school, as well as the school administrators, in really getting to know the needs and profile of a student, and that is reflected in the IEP. And then in terms of our special education staff, our instructional program leaders, our principal and vice principal of special education, as well as other regional support staff, also really get to know our students with special education needs through the school team and get to understand the needs of the students in that school and direct and allocate resources within our department based on that knowledge. So I appreciate that we don't have the data set at this point in time, but rest assured it doesn't really impact how we're able to target the resources based on the needs of a student in a school. Oh, and the final thing I'd just like to kind of connect back to is the student census. And so we heard from Superintendent Etoff around the rich data that we will be able to get out of that student census. And that's another place where we'll be able to get a greater sense of the needs of our students with special education needs.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions at this time?
If I could just circle back, Sean texted me the Quad 4 start date is April 26th.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Okay, no other questions at this time. So we are now at association reports. Do any associations have anything that they would like to make us aware of? Okay, again, I'm just checking my participants. Melissa. You're on mute.
Sorry, I think this would be my first time. I just wanted to share some information to piggyback on top of Sophia's great presentation, that March is also Easter Seals Month. So I know I did a presentation last month, but just there are some awareness and some campaigns going on this month for Easter seals. So just wanted to share that.
Great, thank you. If nobody else has anything, the Learning Disabilities Association does. Our 10th annual Educators Conference will be taking place this Friday and Saturday on March the 5th and 6th. We have 16 amazing speakers lined up, and we encourage anyone interested in education for students with learning disabilities to attend or to register to receive exclusive access to the recordings. We're also proud to announce that we're launching a new summer camp for students with learning disabilities. These will offer literacy and numeracy support in the mornings, as well as social skills training and fun-themed activities in the afternoon. We offer a safe, caring place for students with LDs to interact with their peers facing the same struggles. Information will be available on our website, www.ldahh.ca. Okay, any other? Melissa's just hand still up from last time, or a new point? No, okay. All right, anything else? No? Okay, so now we have item 4.3, the trustees report.
Hello. I think that I'll take the lead on that tonight for my first time, so I'm pretty excited. I just want to thank Sophia again, echo what everybody else has said. I really learned a lot, and I appreciate it. So in terms of trustee board activities over the last month since we were together, I wanted to let you know that trustees participated in a few professional development opportunities over the last month. The first one was an intensive human rights program for school board leaders, and that was 2 sessions put on by York University and Osgoode Law School. As a group, we also participated in the Mohawk Institute Residential School virtual tour. So that's the longest standing residential school in Canada, I believe, and it's in Brantford. So we went on a very impactful virtual tour and got to ask some questions of our tour guide. It was really lots of learning there. And OPSPA also has a speaker series now, and the last couple have been on mental health. So that's a lunch and learn. And OPSPA is the Public School Board Association. So it's the association of trustees from across the province. So it's great to connect with people and just hear what's happening in their boards and how people are managing through COVID at this time. I wanted to let you know that the search for the next HGSB director has commenced. The first activity was to engage an executive search firm, and they've now been retained. And their first order of business is to start with stakeholder consultation. So Allison and/or Lou and/or who you may designate, the search people will be in touch with you to ask you some questions, get your insights just in terms of what we're looking for in the next director. All the information will be put together in a position profile that reflects the dreams of the community, and in order to attract some awesome candidates. And in terms of a broader consultation, there's also going to be a survey that anybody and everybody can take part in. And I believe that is late this month or next month. Everyone, switching gears, everyone's encouraged to participate in the budget consultation. And there's a survey, I believe, that closes on March 5th, which is Friday already. And/or to reach out to Margot around this table in that discussion as well. But just a note that in the recent calls with the minister and in a memo that he put together, he mentioned that next year is going to be funded on a normal year basis, which is a little bit of a concern because nothing really feels normal about this moment in history. Superintendent Etoff already spoke about the student census, and it's really I don't know if I've seen this before, but if you go on the student census page of the website, you can see all of the different languages that it has been translated into. So speaking to some of the accessibility piece that Mary Marshall mentioned, yeah, it's really great and interesting to see. And lastly, I would just say, if anybody has inspired you in the last month related to your student or students in the HGSB, please do nominate them for an Inspire Award. And that the form is really short, but I would just encourage you as one of the coordinators with Margot this year to be specific about why you are nominating those people, because we do have a certain set of criteria that we have to evaluate them, the nominations against. So the more specific you can be, the smoother sailing it is. So my appreciation. Thanks so much. And lastly, did I say lastly before? Well, that was a trick. This one really is lastly, to say that the Student Senate held their annual elections on February 25th with 2 senators being elected, Senator Wijilan Kara and Senator Bao. And they will be the student senators for the 2021-2022 school year. And, you know, there's a lot of things that can be said positive and negative about this virtual format, but we had over 3,000 students vote. Is it 3,000? Yeah, over 3,000 students vote, which is a world record for us so far. So that's great. Thank you. And Margot and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, just quickly, Tracy, it's the student trustees that were voted in, not the senators. So there are 2 new student trustees.
They are. And they will lead the student senate for the next school year.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for our trustees? No? Okay. All right, so finally, committee reports. I'm going to go through a list of the standing committees and ask if there are any updates from our SEAC reps on those committees. The Parent Involvement Committee. Anything going on there? No. The Accessibility Coordinating Committee.
So Alison, I'm just going to check in on this. So I am one of the trustees on this board. I don't know who the rep is from SEAC. Do we have a rep from SEAC for that board?
For PIC?
No, for accessibility.
Oh, for the accessibility?
Mm-hmm.
I do not know. Do we... I know Equity and Inclusive Education, that's Diane, isn't it? Diane van den Bosch.
I don't know that she's here. She was, but she
was here, but I think, oh, Diane is here, yeah.
There she is.
Yeah, so I think Diane, you're, yeah, you're on the Equity.
Yes, I am, and I've been there for several years, so I'm willing to stay, but I don't want to take it away from somebody who may is eager to get that valuable information.
Okay, so but we don't appear to have anybody at this point in time on the Accessibility Coordinating Committee. And who is our representative for PIC?
So I think that might have been Deirdre.
Yeah, I think that was Deirdre.
Okay, so it may be worth us having because I know one of the questions for today was how do you get on a committee, SEAC subcommittee, and I think we need to perhaps have a vote. I don't know whether we have time today, but we certainly need to arrange to see if there are representatives from SEAC who would like to sit on those committees.
So, sorry, just so that you're aware, so for the Accessibility Committee, the next meeting is on March the 11th.
Oh, so we really need somebody.
If there is somebody who is interested in coming on board, if not, I can report back as a dual member. But it's quite an interesting committee. It's new for me, but I would encourage anyone if they are interested. It's lots of information.
So is there anybody who would be interested in sitting on the Accessibility Coordinating Committee?
I'm sorry, quickly, just to give timing for, I know that sometimes comes into play. So they are usually on Thursdays during the month, and they run from 9 in the morning, from 9 till 10:30. Oh, and I have Lucille, that you are on the committee.
No. I don't think so.
So your name is listed, and it's listed that you have accepted the invitation. So just telling you what I see.
Okay, so
if somebody is interested in coming, I will forward your name on, and it would be great.
So sorry, what committee is that?
Accessibility.
Sorry, and I'm sorry, I don't know your first name yet. Lansley.
Yeah, sorry, Sarah. I don't know how to get the meeting. Sorry.
Would you be interested in that, or do the times not work for you?
The time, unfortunately, doesn't work for me. But I would, but I can't. Sorry.
Yes. Would anybody else be interested in? So, is that? So
is it once a month?
Yeah.
So I could do it as long as I couldn't go to the one on the 11th because I have appointments already booked. But I can reserve that time.
Yeah. And we've got Willow's Edge. Is that Lisa?
It is. Thank you. Where are the meetings held?
Well, right now here.
Virtually, yeah.
Okay, but when they're not virtual, are they in Oakville?
I would guess they're in Burlington, but I would assume they're at the school board. But as I said, this is my new committee. So right now it's like this.
Okay. Well,
sorry. Yes, I am on that committee.
Do you? So I
do have a meeting set for the 11th. So I do apologize.
So right now we have some people. So did I notice that? It's community living, is it?
Yeah. Hi, it's Candace. Hi,
Candace.
Marco.
Yeah.
I'm interested, but before I make the final decision here, is it possible to receive some information about the committee? Is there an email or document that you can send just so I can know what I'm possibly volunteering for?
Yeah, I can find some information, but I think we need one rep from SEAC. So I don't know if
Sure. Okay.
So if there's a three, that might make it easier for you as well. I don't know if that makes sense or not. I don't know. But yeah, definitely, Candace, I can find the information and I'll even send it. Maybe Lorna, I could send it to you to include in the SEAC information.
Yeah, that's fine.
That way everybody can get it.
Thank you, Margot.
Okay. And then the other thing that we would have to decide is whether somebody would like to be on the equity and inclusion committee, and whether we have a representative for PIC. But in the light of time, I would suggest that perhaps we set aside some time for that. Perhaps, Lorna, we could, if there is a kind of job description or roles and responsibilities for each of those committees, plus any new committees that are being drawn up by the board, then perhaps could send them out to all SEAC reps so that they can at least come with a better understanding of what the commitment would be and when the times would be and whether that might be a fit for anybody. Is that possible?
Yes, I can certainly look into that and run it by
Colette
and appropriate people. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sounds great. Okay. So at this point in time, you're going to go, Margot, and Lucille, you're going to be going. And then we'll determine whether there's any change arounds after that.
Yeah, so my role isn't as a SEAC rep.
No, yours as a trustee. Yeah.
Sorry, Margaret, I was just confused because I forgot that you and Joanna have switched. So when you said I was on the committee with you, I got a bit taken aback, not realizing that you're the new representative taking. So sorry about that. Sorry to the committee. So yes, okay. I'm on the committee.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so we will get that information going forward. But at this time, I believe there are no reports from any of the committees that are in place at this time. So we are now at item number 5. Are there any specific items that people would like included on our next agenda? No. Okay, so we will look at the different topics and work with Colette and Lorna, Lucille and myself to come up with the agenda for next month. And that being said, it is now my pleasure to adjourn the meeting as we've finished all items on the agenda. It is now 9 o'clock exactly. And I wish you all a wonderful evening. And thank you for all your time and support here, and look forward to seeing you next month. Until then, stay safe, stay safe.
Thanks, Allison.
All right, take care then, everybody. Yep.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you.